For this week, we are going to go over the provisional licensure application process for North Carolina. So North Carolina calls the supervised experience year the SEY, so supervised experience year, the acronym. So you must submit a plan that has to be approved before you start. And the praxis exam would also, they have some requirements about the praxis, which we will review into today's episode. So again, North Carolina provisional license covered the clinical fellowship year. A few things that makes it different from other states is that you have to fill out the supervised experience year plan. You have to submit that, and that has to be approved by the board before you can start your clinical fellowship year. And of course, your service location must be within North Carolina. And the praxis is not required upfront, though. It is due by the end of the year of your clinical fellowship year. So let's go to everything, all things you need to do step by steps. So number one, the application needs to be submitted to the North Carolina applicant portal with a $30 application fee. Then you have to pay the temporary license fee, which is $40. Then your official transcripts from your graduate program must be sent directly to the board, and the clinical clock hour summary form must be signed by your program or clinic director at your school and be sent to the board. The program director page must also be completed to confirm your degree status. You also then need to complete an open book quiz as part of your application. So that's the quiz that review North Carolina practice laws and regulation. Again, it's open book and it's online through the portal. You need to identify your supervisor and list their contact information within your application. Once your provisional license is issued, and you've submitted the plan and have it approved by the board, then you can start your clinical fellowship experience year. And you also need to tell them about your actual service location as well. Now, let's dive into the coursework a little deeper into the coursework and clinical hour requirement, because North Carolina has put those specifics on their website. So for North Carolina, you need a minimum of 75 semester hours, including 15 in basic communication processes, 36 in professional coursework, 6 in audiology, and 6 in clinical practicum. And of course, you need to have completed at least 400 hours of supervised clinical experience with 25 hours of guided observation and 375 hours of direct patient contact. Your hours must be supervised by either an ASHA certified professional or a North Carolina licensed professional. So this is for the coursework requirement to validate your degree. Next, for the actual clinical fellowship year duration and supervision requirement. So they set the parameters, which are pretty standard across the board, but I'll go over it here for North Carolina. Of course, you need the minimum of 1,260 hours over at least 9 months. At least 70% of the time must be clinical activities. It must be completed within 18 months with one extension. One extension may be granted. Hours not completed within 24 months, you must be restarted entirely. So if you're unable to complete your clinical fellowship period hours within 24 months, you must restart the next time you apply again. If you're completing your clinical fellowship here with a full-time job, you'll need a minimum of 4 hours of direct supervision per month and at least 12 hours per quarter. And if you're doing part-time, you'll need half of that. So a minimum of 2 hours of direct supervision per month and at least 6 hours per quarter. Telesupervision, so for telehealth, is accepted if approved by a supervisor. I hope that today's episode have been really enjoyable for you so far. Please take the time to leave us a review, to leave us a comment, and to like today's episodes. It will really help us develop those videos and put them out faster. And if you have the time, feel free to check out the Arc Synergy app on both iOS and Android. The app is free and there's a free clinician plan, so you don't have to worry about doing any subscription to get started in the app. And let me know what you think. Now, let's get back into the episode. Now, speaking of supervisors, your supervisor must hold a valid North Carolina license through the entire duration of your clinical fellowship year. If your supervisor becomes unable to continue at any point, they are required to immediately notify the board, and you will need a new approved supervision arrangement before you can continue. Any changes to your supervisor's schedule or service location must be submitted and approved in advance through the board. Now, here's how you would transition to a permanent license. Your provisional license expires 20 days after your clinical fellowship year completion date. So that 20-day window exists to allow the board to process your application, and you need to have provided your transition document, right? So you will need to complete the SEY report filed by your supervisor. You need to pay the permanent license fee of $60. Send official transcript if something had changed. If you didn't have that previously, but you'll need to have your official transcript on file, and your praxis score will need to be sent to the board as well. Or, and in lieu of a praxis score, if you have your HSCs, if you apply first for your HSCs after your CF and you obtain that first, you can have that verification be sent from ASHA to the board, and that will replace the requirement for your praxis score. Provisional licenses working in North Carolina public school must hold a valid NCBOE SLPA license first, and that is done to the North Carolina DPI. The school documentation is submitted separately to the Department of Public Instruction after your board license is issued. And we went over that last week in the full licensure requirements, so feel free to watch that to obtain all of the important information. Licenses are generally issued the week following the board meeting if all documents are received, allowing up to 10 business days after the meeting. And we keep all the board's contact information, including their phone number, email address, on the Arc Synergy app, which you can access for free. So, in conclusion, North Carolina Provisional Licensure is a license you obtain to complete your CF, right? You must submit the SEY plan, and that has to be approved before your clinical fellowship year begins. You need to specify your service location and the supervisor's information on the plan, and if any changes occurred, you need to let the board know, and it needs to be approved. The praxis score reporting is due at the end of the clinical fellowship period, and you have a 20-day transition window after completion of your clinical fellowship in order to transition to a permanent licensure information. And that is all you need for the provisional license. Next week, we will cover the renewal licensure information, and including all the CEUs and fees and grace period and all of that good information. So thanks for watching. See you next week.